say you're fine, but I can see right through. You're holding your secrets for way too long. This can't keep going on. With every lie, they keep on hurting you, getting away with everything they do. This can't keep going on. No, we're gonna find them, and I'm gonna fight for you. They better start hiding. We'll be running with the lions, lions. We'll be running with the lions, lions. They can't run, they can't hide. We won't stop until they're down. We'll be running with the lions, lions.
Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday and welcome to another episode of Gloves Off. I'm your host, Dr. Kalpana Sundar, and I'm live from San Diego, California. So for those of you who are new and have not watched the show before, Gloves Off is a show about people who show up authentically. They have a mission. They want to change things in the world. Usually it's because of a personal story or a personal situation that they've gone through, and they take that situation and they create something good out of it. And these people are always very courageous. I guess that's the best word I can come up with, because they are courageous, they're authentic, they shed their ego, their gloves, and do what's needed in the world. And that is no different from my guest today. So for those of you who've been tuning in, I appreciate you coming back, and please share this with other people who you think would be interested in this content. So I cannot believe that it is the end of July already. Whew, and finally, the weather in San Diego got a little cooler. We had a couple of hot days. I know people in San Diego tend to complain if the weather gets a little above 75. I mean, we're really spoiled, I have to say. But we had a beautiful day today, and I'm excited. So today we are going to be sitting down with Laura Richards. She was married to a narcissist for 32 years. And, you know, it's funny what we don't realize, how much goes on behind the scenes of a marriage, right? People will look at things from the outside. They see things from a whole different perspective than what really is happening on the inside. So we're going to get into that just shortly. But first, I just want to introduce our sponsor, as always, Elevated CPA, Doug Benefield, Tammy Long. If you're looking for somebody to do taxes for you and alleviate that stress of all of the non-fun accounting stuff, you may want to check them out. All right, before we get started and bring Laura onto our stage here, just want to talk a little bit about narcissistic personality disorder. I have to say, I think this is a word that is tossed around a lot these days. So it's just important to go over what that really is. Believe it or not, narcissistic personality disorder only affects 1% of the population. It's usually men, unfortunately, and it's really characterized by a couple of different traits. One is this lack of empathy that really is important, because when you lack empathy, you're often not, I'm sorry, what's the word I'm looking for? You're often like not looking at people's, I just totally lost my train of thought today, because what happened was my fan started going on really loud all on its own. So it completely distracted me. So anyway, with narcissistic personality disorder, people lack the empathy and they're often very manipulative. That was the word I was looking for. So, and they really need a lot of validation from other people. So, one thing that I want to say before we just, because I think a lot of people display aspects of these behaviors and it's easy to label somebody something. So, it's important to say that it needs to be diagnosed by a mental health professional. So, that's the big thing because I've heard women and men talk about everybody being narcissistic, and I don't know that that's really where we want to be. We want to identify people who have those traits, maybe be on the lookout, but not start labeling people. So, with that said, let's talk to somebody who has some real experience with this. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Hi.
Hello, welcome to the show. Sorry, I got all tongue-tied because
That's okay.
I was like, why is this fan starting on its own? It freaked me out a little bit.
Oh my gosh. Especially when it's live. I hate the distractions, but that happens, you know.
Well, I don't know. I've never seen it just turn on all by itself. That was a
Oh,
little
gee.
weird. I was like, well, I don't know what's going on here. Anyway,
Oh my goodness. And I'm in Las Vegas and we had a record-breaking 120-degree day a couple weeks ago.
whew,
So yeah, you guys are complaining over 75. Okay.
well, that's what we do in San Diego. It's a thing. It's really a thing.
It's so funny. Well,
So,
I'm glad you brought that subject up. So I hope we can discuss that, the
absolutely.
diagnosis and then the word being tossed around because I often have this discussion about that.
Yes, and that's really the point I wanted to make because I what I do, the reason I do this show is really to bring awareness, not to
Right.
start casting labels on
Yeah.
people and creating separation. I do this show because at the end of the show, I want people to look at something they
Mhm.
don't know as much about and understand that we're all really in this together. So let's
Yep.
come from a place of understanding, not finger pointing and all that. So that's
Right.
what I want.
Right.
So tell us about your experience. I mean, I know we could, but I guess the first thing was, when did you know you were in a narcissistic, abusive
Ugh.
relationship?
I didn't even notice until like year 30. So the last, I mean, really, and I talk about this in my book because this is a thing called delayed realization. You don't even know because my ex is a covert narcissist. He's not diagnosed, but he has every trait. Because one of the traits is also that you won't go near anyone who will diagnose you with anything. And so that's why the number is only 1%. That's the diagnosis.
Wow, that's a great point. I didn't think about that.
Yes,
Okay.
even though so they're not gonna go near anyone to get diagnosed, and so, year 30 was in 2020, and my mother passed away, and then, during the pandemic, our sister-in-law passed away, and there was that lack of empathy that you were talking about, and I just started to be like, "Can I continue to live my life like this?" He would ask me, "Why are you still sad?" What do you mean? Why am I so sad? My goodness. I mean, we had two family members pass away and my mother, look, I'm going to be, sad about my mother forever. And it's that lack of empathy, which is it's such a hallmark. And it had been difficult for so many years, but I started to learn in that year 30 or so something was going on. I started to learn the word gaslighting and how he was really manipulating me with all of his words and telling me I wasn't remembering anything correctly. And when you're in abuse for a long time, you're really foggy headed. And now we're compounding it with grief. I barely could like see straight, you know what I mean? And it was really terrible. And so if he's telling me you're not remembering it correctly, maybe I wasn't, and especially when you trust your partner, you've been with somebody for so long, this person says they love you. And so that was hard. And so that's when I started realizing, I think, what was going on. And I started telling him, I think you're gaslighting me. Like if I present a PowerPoint presentation, he'll just go, oh, okay, I'll stop. You know what I mean? And you're not supposed to tell them that kind of stuff because the minute you do, they don't want anything to do with you. And he really started discarding me after that because I had figured out his game. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. So it was really the empathy that really tipped you off. But there
Yeah.
must obviously have been things going on prior to that that
Yeah.
you didn't probably put two and two together.
No, I didn't. I didn't put two and two together. I really thought my husband was just difficult. And if I could just explain myself a little bit better, he would understand. But they really fake this, not even understanding kindergarten concepts, so that you have to keep explaining yourself, and then they can turn it around on you and say, you're so difficult and you are just making a big deal. They don't want to take accountability. So any way that they can turn it around, like I learned in therapy never to use the words, never, always, but
Mhm.
narcissists have traits. They never take accountability and they always blame you. So those are traits. They can't even, like, they don't want to try and work it out. And so that's why it was a good point that you brought up about the labeling, because I have so many friends. Is my ex, is my ex a narcissist or whatever? And it's like, that's not necessary to even know. Who cares?
Right.
When you are in a relationship with anybody, even friends, if you have a disagreement and you want to try and work it out with them, they will work it out with you. But if they're toxic, they're not going to. They're just going to find a way to blame you only, and you have to do it my way, and that's the end of the story. And that was what always happened with me. And so it got to a point where I said, I can't live life like this anymore, even though I was fully committed to my marriage. I just couldn't live life like that anymore.
One thing that comes to my mind as you're talking about this, I feel, and correct me if I'm, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I can
Uh-huh.
speak for something I've experienced in the past. When something, any relationship wasn't working out, I could not accept just that it wasn't working out as a
Right.
reason for
Right.
me to part ways with that person.
Hmm.
So, in in place of that, what I found myself doing was trying to find a diagnosis
Right.
with people. When in reality, yes, I think it is obviously important to be diagnosed if there are these kind of
Right.
disorders in place. So I'm not negating or downplaying that at all.
Right.
But I also want to throw out there that just because somebody is not diagnosed as something, if they're exhibiting behaviors that are not respectful,
Mhm.
maintaining the personal boundaries, professional boundaries, whatever
Right.
the case may be, I think that is a valid enough reason to exit the relationship. Or if they're not wanting to work things out, all of these things. But I grew up in very much the same way. I just thought you just stuck it out.
Right.
And, I just didn't understand all this stuff until much, much later in life. And it sounds like, I feel like I've always felt we have a lot of programming around this.
Oh,
I don't know
yeah,
if
for
you
sure. You get married for forever. I had, his parents are still married. My parents were married until my mom passed away. But people are staying married. And sometimes I look at them and say, like, why? Like, you just to say you were married 50, 60 years when you can't even stand each other. And
Mhm.
that's one of the hallmarks, really, that they look for these women that are strong, people pleasers, all these things. I really had a lack of boundaries. I was really empathetic, all these things. And so I was giving him chance after chance after chance, because there were other things that I shouldn't have put up with: lies, betrayal, things like that. And so those are the things that you have to just say to yourself: is this the life you want to live? And is this the relationship I want to have? Am I being treated with respect? Because I wasn't being treated with respect. And we went to marriage counseling a million times. I went to counseling a million times because he told me everything was my fault. And he gave me the list of things I had to work on. And because that's what I thought I should do. And I really had a lack of boundaries at that point. I really didn't have boundaries. I didn't know what boundaries were. I thought it was telling people what to do. And as a people pleaser, well, recovering people pleaser, my gosh, I'm not going to tell anybody what to do. That's terrible. And they really will prey on that, and they will use that to their advantage. You don't have boundaries. You are willing to really do whatever it takes, because every time I would ask him, we would communicate, you're too flirty with so and so or whatever. And he would say, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm a flirty guy. And he would say he would stop, but then he'd do it again, because in their mind, you told them to stop, but they still want it. And if you allow it every single time, which I did for years and years and years until I finally didn't, then they'll just keep doing it. And so if you give them an inch and they take a mile, It doesn't have to be one and done, though some people it is. They catch them cheating, you're out.
Mhm.
And it just was so I stayed for a long time. Women stay longer than they probably should because of
I
the
think
way
all women do.
oh, well, yeah. I mean,
Wouldn't
it's
say
our
all, but
nature.
most.
Yeah, it's our nature. It's probably the way we're wired and we're very
Mhm.
nurturing. We stay longer. And men would never put up with, what they put us through. They would never do that. They wouldn't hang around for this kind of stuff, yet we hang on. And I'm just kind of being a little bit general, but women, that's what we do. We usually stay longer than we should.
So I have a question for you. So you were talking about, and I know this as well from my research on narcissistic personality, because of
Uh,
course, like in my phases of when I was trying to figure out what
right.
wasn't working, I'm like, well, what label can I put on this person?
It feels good to put a label.
I know. I was like, I want to put a label on this. This makes this okay now for me to walk away because,
Yes.
and I can now say this person is X, Y, and Z. But now I don't need to do that. But
Yes,
but
exactly.
tell me, I feel like it is so counterintuitive, really, that narcissists will. I was going to say prey, for lack of a better
Mhm.
word, but that on strong women.
Yes. Yes.
So can you explain why that is?
Well, because so they need people to mirror. They know they have to find a way to be in society. And if they don't have these skills, they're going to, when we met, he wasn't a giver. He started to be a giver because I am. I would serve in the community. He started serving in the community, and it helps build up that facade, especially when you have a covert narcissist. Behind the scenes, at home, they're a completely different person. They don't care. They're not going to help anybody out, or they're not going to help anybody at home. Out in the world, in public, they're helping everybody. He would serve in the community. Everybody thought he was so great. And so they need people to model their life from. And so basically, I hate to say this for your listeners, but you're basically falling in love with yourself because they are mirroring you.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Whoa.
It's painful.
That was kind of like a mind fuck.
I know.
I was like,
Sorry.
wait.
Look,
Like,
if I had to go through it, you guys have to with me.
wow. So they really they find women that
Yeah.
more like what they want to be
Yes.
viewed as, and obviously they need that external validation, so that
Yes.
they enjoy this high level of the
Right.
power, the women who are giving back, the women who are powerful,
But they
and
need to
then
be people pleasers. It's
I was
not
going to say,
yeah, we can't just be powerful and because, a lot of us who are powerful like now, I don't take any crap, but before he could see I was a people pleaser. I was really not only giving physically, but in my emotions as well. Because, the thing about being a giver, you have to remember the takers are going to take, they don't have boundaries. And so they can spot you a mile away and they'll be like, oh, yeah, I can take advantage of her. You know how sometimes you meet new people and all of a sudden they're like, I need a ride to the airport or whatever. And you just met them, they just can smell it on you. And that's when you have to learn how to set your boundaries right away. And that was the ultimate act of self-love for me, was learning how to do that.
I feel like this is something they should teach us in school. I mean, honestly, I went through a lot of years learning calculus. I don't think I've ever really used that.
No.
But yeah, this is very valuable. I mean,
Yeah,
when I took calculus, I really wondered why I was taking it. What
I
was this
know.
going to do for me? But anyway, coming back to
Mhm.
this, I feel this is valuable information for
Yeah.
not only women, but men to
Oh,
know
yeah, for sure.
how to maintain boundaries, because as I reflect on in my early years, in my early 20s and whatnot, I used to wonder why I attracted these energy vampires. So
Yes.
I knew that term back then. So I said,
Yes.
why do I always attract these energy vampires? Not realizing that I was providing a source of strength for them, something to lean on. I was there to help them. And then I found myself emotionally drained. But again, these were concepts that I didn't really understand.
Right.
So flash forward many years, now I understand these concepts. But it's funny that although I'm not this open, porous, membrane,
Right.
I like to put that the analogy in place because I feel like when we have boundaries and they're too porous, that's not a good
Yes.
thing. They
Right.
can also be too fixed.
Yes.
That's not a good thing.
Right.
We have to have boundaries that are malleable to some extent,
Yes.
because they can shift over time, they can shift with different people. They
Mhm.
have to be something that's a work in progress. So, this is not stuff I was ever taught. This is
No.
something you were ever taught it. And I
Mm-mm.
think all people, not just women,
Yeah.
people need to understand boundaries when they're violated. And I have to say one thing that's really funny. I said something to my son one day, this is my
Mhm.
kid, so I feel like I can say
Right.
whatever. Well, he didn't like it.
Wow.
And he said, "You know what, Mom? I know you mean well, but I didn't like what you said." It made it seem as if, and I didn't mean it that way, but it did seem that way
Yeah.
because of the way I said it. And I thought to myself, wow, that's great. This kid
Yes.
has a boundary for me.
I
And
love it.
I love it. I actually was very happy that
Yes.
he has a boundary, because as far as my parents were concerned, I had no boundaries. I
No.
just recently found boundaries with them.
Yeah, I feel you. It's hard because I'm Hispanic, and so, you're brought up in a house where you don't talk back, and even saying saying like I don't like that is like talking back. No, I'm actually just giving my opinion, and but that's how I was brought up, and also that's just the way it was. And boundaries, I never heard of such a thing. And with people pleasing too, it sounds like boundaries are supposed to be, like you said, almost like this door or something, and it is really, I heard it said recently that it's almost like a bridge. So you're over here and I'm over here. And the way to get to me, this is what my boundaries look like. You can do it. You can come over to my side, but you don't get to comment on what I'm eating for dinner and call me fat and things like that. You know what I mean? Like those kind, which is something common. I always bring that up because that was a very common thing growing up. It's like, oh, you're eating that, that kind of thing.
Right.
And so those kinds of boundaries. So I always think about it like that, as like this bridge where you tell people, this is how I will be in relationship with you. You
Mhm.
don't have to tell them what to do. Thank God, because that people
Oh, yeah.
pleaser to me wants to
That's
be like, no.
No, 100%. And don't you think, I actually think I have a feeling we're probably raised in the same generation, but
Mhm.
don't you think that what our parents did to us by, this whole not talking back, just obey
Yeah.
us, listen to what we say and don't question it? I do honestly believe that that has set the stage for
Yeah.
a lot of these things to happen to us
Oh, yeah.
because of
Yes. Because, well, it's so true, because you just become this person that, I always say that this, like, you're the good girl, right? You're the good girl. You do all the right things. You follow all the rules and all this stuff without realizing you just were never allowed to give your opinion, for Pete's sakes. You barely have a personality because you weren't allowed to give an opinion. And even now, as I'm learning, I have friends who are like, we don't even know this Laura. I'm like, I don't know this Laura. I'm figuring her out. I'm learning what I can say and not say. Look, I used to say for 33 years of my life being with my ex, but really it was 55 years.
Mm,
My Up until 55 years of my life, the last 2 years, I've been figuring out, how do I give an opinion to someone and I have to be okay with what's happening on the other side. They say I don't agree with that or whatever. And yet I am alive through it, and because when you grow up and you're just the good girl doing what you're supposed to do, you don't learn how to do that. You don't learn how to give an opinion because you're told not to.
I just gave a talk and I talked about this good girl conditioning. It was, I don't know if you're
Yes.
familiar with it, but it was Dr. Carol Gilligan who actually in the 1970s coined the term. And our society, especially when it comes to girls,
Yeah.
is we're praised for being good, being quiet, being
Yes.
respectful, being obedient. And I joked, and when I gave the talk, and I said, but we're not praised for speaking our mind.
No.
We are not praised for that. And just like you, same thing. I never would speak my mind, especially maybe to other people, yes, but I have to tell you, to my parents, no,
No. No.
until somewhat recently. And now I say, you know what, listen, you don't pay my bills anymore. You don't provide
Right.
me with really anything. And now you don't get to say these things to me. And
Yeah.
nor do I have to agree with you.
Right. And we're called the B word if we do speak our mind. And that's a thing. And that's why we're praised. And it's really that conditioning societally of women. And
Mhm.
so I believe that really did get me into a position where, I can even think back to boyfriends and stuff like that.
Oh
Oh
yeah.
my gosh, he's like fawning over me. He's telling me all the things I want to hear. And so I was fully
Love
committed.
bombing. Love
Love,
bombing.
love bombing. Yep.
All the terms that we didn't know back then.
I know.
I thought that was great. I was like, I really like love bombing till I
Yeah.
found out it was really a bad thing. I was like,
Right. Exactly. I mean, buy me all the gifts, but
right.
it's a bad
And
thing.
it's funny because we're also I actually wrote about this too in my book because we are it starts really really young. If you go, have you ever watched a Disney movie? Have you gone
Yes.
back and watched Disney? And I'm like,
Yes.
what are we telling girls?
I
What in the
know.
world?
I was even watching Sex and the City. I haven't watched Sex and the City in a million years. And I was like, what the heck? What a toxic show. Everybody's
Oh
like,
wow, I
oh,
have to go
Mr.
watch it
Me.
then.
Really? I'm like, oh my gosh, he's so toxic.
Oh wow. I think it'd be interesting to go back and watch a lot of the
Yes.
things we liked once upon a time
Right.
and see how it doesn't really fit
I
in
have
anymore.
such a hard time. It's terrible. When I was
Yes.
in therapy, I've been in therapy, for during this, and I say, "Is everybody a narcissist?" And she's like, "No, calm down."
Exactly.
I'm like, "Are you sure?"
So I have to say that, so now you're in this, I just want to like retrace the steps
Yep.
backwards. So you figured it out in 30 years into this, and you're like, what, how did I not see this? Okay. But now you're wanting to get a divorce. And it's so hard because
Mhm.
I was also married a very long time like you.
Yeah.
And it's just so hard to start
Mhm.
extracting your life from another human being's life because you
Yes.
share life and friends and
Mhm.
everything.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how was that transition for you from when you
Mhm.
made the decision? Did you tell him first or how did you navigate all that?
Yeah, it was really hard. When you're with someone who has narcissistic tendencies, like I said, the last couple of years, he really stopped talking to me. He was discarding me. That's really what's happening. And actually, there's a term, it's called the reverse discard. They just are discarding you so much. He stopped talking to me the last 2 years. He just really stopped talking to me. He was just like, okay, I'm leaving. And he would go off and do whatever.
I
And
mean, I mean, so pretty much when you were home alone, he just didn't talk to you.
yeah, there was a lot of yeah,
Ooh.
there was a lot of like really not he didn't ask me anymore about me. He didn't care about anything. He would just literally look up from what I say, the newspaper, right? His iPad, but he would just look up and he'd acknowledge that I said words, but that's it. He'd just like nod his head and go back. Because the point of them is they're going to make you not want to be there at all so that you will ask for the divorce because they have already been smearing your name in the smear campaign, telling everybody that they have a terrible marriage. So they can be the victim if you ask for the divorce. It will go along with their narrative. Yes, they're very like, it's
I
all,
didn't know.
oh, yeah. And so I suspected he was talking about me behind my back, but since my kids are grown, they told me, yeah, that's what he was doing. And so it really goes with the narrative. And that's why my book is called Married to a Nice Guy, because people
I
were
love
like, but
that.
he's so nice. I'm like, uh-huh, but at home he's like the world's biggest jerk. And I don't know what to tell you, and it's really hard to explain that to people. So I was sitting on the couch, he was leaving to go do something, and he said, if this is the way our life is going to be, you should tell me you're done. And I said,
Mm.
why do I have to tell you I'm done? I didn't even know about the reverse discard. And he said, yeah, you're right. I'm just not brave enough to do it. He actually said something a lot more crass than that, but I will clean it up. And and I wrote it in my book, and the reason I wrote the crass sentence he said to me in the book is because I want people to understand. I bring awareness. I
Uh-huh.
want people to understand how narcissists are behind closed doors, the
Mhm.
way they talk to the people they say they love the most. And so I won't gatekeep any of this, and I will bring awareness, and I will say, like, this is not okay. And so I'm in black and white. That was part of my petty thing that I did.
We have those moments. It's okay.
I know. I even was like, petty alert. Anyway, so, so he said,
At
he
least you
said,
called yourself out.
that's right. And he said, so if you don't want to be together, let me know, whatever. And, I started to say one more time, well, if we could just work on whatever. And I'm thinking, Laura, 32 years already. Like, what else does he need? And I could hear my therapist's voice saying he's either unwilling or unable. So this is for everybody in any relationship. They're either unwilling or unable. And
And what I would say that applies to even not narcissists. That applies
yes,
to any relationship.
everybody,
So
friendships, you know.
my question for you, are narcissists able to change? I mean, what does your therapist say on that?
So from what I've understood from, people who are actually more educated than I am about this subject, like Dr. Ramani, I don't know if you follow her at all. She's amazing. So they, I think they can change, but it takes a lot of work. They don't want to because they don't think there's anything wrong. So it's really that whole thing, right? That we all have to come to that point where we say, I need to make a change, but
Mhm.
they don't want to. They just it's all about them. It's a very self-centered, you
Mhm.
know, we can say disorder, even though he's not diagnosed. And
Mhm.
everything was about him. Every conversation was about him. Everything was about him, except when he was telling me what was my fault, which was
So
lengthy, So, I mean, that's really hard to recover from when you're so beat down that
mhm.
for 30 years, 32 years, somebody's telling you these are all the terrible things you do all the time. And look,
Right.
I took it to heart. I did not know. My therapist kept telling me, just put it down. You don't have to listen to that. And I'd be like, but he said I was terrible. Because I thought if somebody said you were XYZ, that meant you were and you had to fix it. I didn't know that when people say stuff to you, you actually don't have to believe it. Did you
Yeah,
know
you
that?
just go,
You don't have to believe it because I do have introspection. And so I can say, is that true? Is that not true? Let me look at
right.
that. No, that's not true. So I don't have to take that on.
Right. But when someone that you love says
Yes.
something like that about
Yes.
you, I'm sorry, it hits and it
It
hurts.
does.
And words can be way more painful than
Mhm.
sometimes. I mean, not to discount physical abuse, but I'm
Yes. Yeah.
saying that I don't know. All of it is so
Yeah.
detrimental.
Yeah.
Even with physical abuse, the emotional abuse, I think, is the things that are
Yes.
scarring people for much
Right.
longer. So, I mean, not to discount that in
No,
any
and it is true because even in physical abuse, they're still saying, they're saying I love you and then they're hitting you. This
exact.
person is saying I love you and then they're telling people behind
Yeah.
your back that you're a terrible person and all these
And
things
that's
and
painful.
betraying you and lying to you. That's horrible.
Right. So with the friends, was it hard when the announcement comes out to the people that you know? What was the reaction?
Yeah, everybody was really, really surprised, and I said, "Yeah, I'm really surprised myself." But I said in that time, I said, "Yeah, I'm done," because I heard my therapist's voice saying, "Is he unwilling or unable?" And I thought to myself, "He's unwilling." I stopped mid-sentence and I stood up and I said, "I'm done." And I didn't talk to him for 2 days because I just was so done. Like a woman who is done, 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 forget it. Like there was no getting me back.
Mm.
And so when we told the kids right away, actually my oldest two congratulated me because they knew how miserable I was.
Wow.
We think they don't know.
Oh,
Look,
they know.
they know.
Even the young ones know, actually.
Yeah,
The young
they all
ones.
know. They know. And so I felt really bad. I felt really ashamed, and that's one of the reasons why I started talking about this because I felt really ashamed. And that's a lot of times where people go is they go to shame.
Hmm.
And I didn't want to stay there. And I
Hmm.
thought, why isn't anybody talking about this? And that's how I started talking about it.
Well, the fact that your children knew
Yeah.
probably told you quite a bit,
I
and
know.
it's interesting because they see so much, and
Mhm.
it actually hurts them when they
I
watch their
know.
parents being treated in a certain way.
Yeah.
So I've never really understood how much women put up with. I mean, and I don't know if you did this, but I'm just saying in general, a
Yeah.
lot of women will say, "I stayed because the
Mhm.
common things I hear are for the kids,
Yeah.
for the money."
Yeah.
And they're often afraid of the change. Those are the three things that
Yes.
I hear the most. I don't know, what you.
Yes, for sure. And that's why when I talk about it on my podcast and on social media. I do these scenarios because those are the things that come up as well. You're
Mhm.
already miserable. Do you think you're going to be worse? No, you're not. It's not going to be worse because you're actually going to have peace And that is the thing, is we can do hard things. So we
Oh,
have
yeah.
to take that first step. It is scary because it's something new. My gosh, I was building a life with somebody, and it was a complete change, but I had peace and I was sleeping in peace. And that's what was. And people said, are you lonely? I said, I was already lonely. I was already lonely in my marriage. So there's no difference. This is me and my cat. I'm very happy now.
Yes. No, it's true because that's the thing. I mean, just having another human being in your life
Yeah.
doesn't make you not feel lonely.
Right.
To me, I to me it's actually worse when you're in a relationship and lonely. I would
Yes.
rather be by myself and
Yeah.
feel lonely and it's funny. I would say that, since I've been single, I get lonely. Yes, sometimes it gets really
Mhm.
bad. I'm not going to lie and say that
Yeah.
any of these things are easy, but I don't think I'd ever trade that for peace.
Right.
Peace is
Exactly.
my number one need. Peace.
Right.
Anything that destroys my peace cannot stay in my life. So if
Yes.
it's other humans, if it's anything, it just cannot destroy my peace. So I think when we set the bar so high
Yeah.
on our peace, it's amazing what you won't tolerate. And
It's
it's
true.
not
And that's
about
why,
tolerating people. It's about your level of peace that's up here that you'd like to maintain.
it's so true. And that's why, men on whatever are talking about how women don't want to date and where are the good women. And I'm like, wow, you know what? You're competing with our peace. And that's the hard thing, is that I'm not willing to just go out with anybody. I'm not willing to just put myself into a relationship with anybody just for the
Right.
sake of having somebody had that. And now I have peace. So I see the difference. And that's why the biggest thing when you leave any relationship, really, but especially when you leave abuse, you have to work on loving yourself. And because then I'll be ready to allow any person, a relationship, a
Mhm.
friend, anything, to come into my life and say, like, no, you are disturbing my peace. I can't, this. And so then a boundary has to be set. So you have to learn how to love yourself through it.
There's so many interconnections between all of
Yes.
these points. I'd
Mhm.
like to just sort of stop and pause and bring
Yep.
light to that because number one, I think a lot of this happens to women when we really don't love ourselves
Yeah.
that much.
Yeah.
And self-love is a process,
It is.
meaning that we don't just wake up and we're like, woohoo, I have
I
so
love,
much
yeah,
self-love.
everything's great. Yeah.
It's just, self-love is about loving the parts of you that you're not even that sure of, and it's taken me a very long time to get to that
Mhm.
place, and I'm sure it has you,
Mhm.
because once you get to that place of self-love, I think it's also interwoven. So I
Mhm.
feel like it starts that when you start to build, when you break free from something that
Yeah.
wasn't serving you, then you probably go through a dark phase. I did, just because
Yes.
everything was
Oh,
different.
for
And it was
sure.
like, whew. I was like, whoa, my life just changed, and I'm not sure
Mhm.
if this was a good thing or a bad thing. I was confused. I mean, I didn't go through what you
Oh,
went through, but
God,
I
yeah, for
was
sure.
confused. And sometimes I thought I made the wrong decision, but I know that I didn't. And then I started to realize in how many ways I didn't love myself or advocate for myself. And yet, when other people talk to me, they'll look at people like you and I and say, "Well, you're
Mhm.
so strong," and
Yeah,
but you're not seeing the things on the inside.
right.
And that leads to lack of boundaries. That
Mhm.
leads to
Right.
allowing people to treat us in certain ways. Then that leads to, well, it's just like a downward spiral, I feel
It
like.
is.
Now, if again, something they should teach us in school and not, I guess I didn't like calculus. So instead of calculus, they should have taught us this. I'm picking on calculus.
Well, yeah.
Feel like this is so there are a lot of things that are so important that we're just
Mhm.
not taught by anybody. And I think one big thing that I would like to say is that I think all parents out there, parents of young girls and young boys, should really have this sort of conversation with their
Yeah.
children about boundaries, about to loving themselves, to know what's not
Mhm.
right. Because if we raise our children in the way that we were raised, which was the
Mhm.
adults are always right, what
Right.
is the world like today? We have all kinds of crazy things going on. So if
Yeah.
adults are always right, well, you allow your child to be exposed to a lot of bad things.
It's so true. And so I'm going to be a grandma in October. I'm so very excited. My oldest is having a baby, and to have a conversation with this generation, she's 31. The thought process on every single thing. Like she's like, yeah, these are the boundaries I'm having for the baby. I'm just like, my gosh, I just like, are we allowed to do that? Because that was like, you just allowed your family to come over anytime and do whatever they wanted to the baby and all that stuff. And she has all these boundaries already in place because she's wants to raise her daughter a certain way. And I was like, that's beautiful, because
I love
she's
it.
she's a firstborn too. I'm a firstborn. So look, she's suffering from the same kind of people pleasing, getting herself into, she said, I don't even have a personality half the time because I'm always trying to people please. And
That's
that's what ends up happening. And so that's something that I just love, this generation and the things that they're talking about.
This generation is definitely more conscious than we
Yes.
were, for sure. I don't know how they learned to be, or if it's just, that's a whole nother
I
discussion.
know.
I would agree that when I talk to my children, I'm
Yeah.
actually very, very surprised at how they process information, how
Yes.
they deal with things. And I thought, wow, I feel like although we were the generation that sort of grew up on our own, so to speak,
Right.
like the Gen Xers, I don't know. It's really
It
interesting that
is.
what the transition is. And I really do feel like it's a very good transition
It
because
is.
the old ways, we're not the only ones who've gone through this. I mean, I think if you
Right.
speak to so many people in our generation,
Hmm.
probably most of them have these issues because of the way we were raised. Adults are
Yeah.
always right. You obey us. You don't talk
Right.
back, et cetera, et cetera. But the world has changed. It's a scary world out there. We
Mhm.
all need to be a lot more careful. So maybe
Yeah,
that was what it is.
for
I
sure.
know I used to go out and do whatever till midnight
I
or
know.
until it was dark. And now, you don't let your
It's
kids
like,
do
no. I wanted to comment about when you were saying some things before when you were, and one of the things is that when we have this voice in our head as part of self love, right? When we
that.
have this voice in our head, sometimes it's not even our voice. When we grew up and my mom was always on a diet, and, my dad thought it was okay to just tell me I was fat, things like that.
Mhm.
When we are at this age, that we're looking at, really, and this can apply to anybody, but when we're looking at ourselves in the mirror, when you look at yourself in the mirror, which a lot of people won't even do, which breaks my heart, think about the voice that's in your head. Is it really your voice that's saying
Wow.
you look terrible? Is that really your voice, or is it, like, say, your mom's voice being nitpicky because you aren't a certain size or whatever? Is it really your body? I mean, your voice looking at your body going, my gosh, my body has served me well. I've had 3 children, and you know what I mean? And so that's something I've really been trying to think about. Whose voice is that? And that's something that is part of that self-love, because it might not even be your own voice.
That is such a great point. It's so
Mhm.
true because
Yeah.
a lot of times what we say to ourselves isn't our own voice,
No.
but it's pre-programming.
Yes.
I heard it described as a software update.
Oh, that's
And
good.
I like that. And
Yeah.
this was actually, it's Regan Hillier. I was at Mind Valley a couple of weeks ago, and she said that your mind needs a software update. So she attributed it to an iPhone, something
Yeah.
it says iPhone update due soon, and you're like,
Right.
yeah, whatever, I'll do it later.
Right.
She's like, it comes up again. You're like, I'll do it later.
Uh,
Then she made a point to stress that we need a software update.
oh, that's so good.
We need to do this to our own minds and
Mhm.
redo, upgrade our software to
Mhm.
better software that is more in line with where we want to be in this world. I mean, what she was talking about was money manifestation, but I feel like it
Right.
applies to all of this.
It really does.
We need a software upgrade from our old patterns of thinking to new, better, more positive patterns of thinking.
You're
So
not gonna get where you wanna go using the same patterns of thinking. You're going to have to learn along the way something new, and you can try new things, and it
mhm.
may not be what you wanna continue doing, but that's why I've been trying so many different ways of healing, therapy, coaching, you know, meditation, hypnosis, all these things, right? And the things that I liked, I continued with. The things I didn't, I said, okay, well, that was a life lesson and I didn't like that and whatever. And we moved on. But it was part of that. I'm going to learn how to do that update on my mind, because what I was doing before didn't work for me.
That's also a really great point because, again, I think again, when we grew up, there was only therapy available, right?
Right.
So that was the only thing we know. But now the world is open to
So
up to
much.
so much. Like you said,
Mhm.
hypnosis. There's Reiki.
Mhm.
There's
Yes.
coaching, and there's so many different things that can help us mentally and emotionally. That it is important, I feel, to be open to so many different methodologies
Yeah.
that could be helpful.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. It's been so good to do all these things. That was the biggest challenge for me was my mind because you really feel when you leave abuse, you're going to see the clarity you get. And as I didn't know that was going to happen. And as I started to get clarity, I said, oh, I like this. So I
Mhm.
could actually think and enjoy things and start thinking for myself, which is terrible to say, but it's true. I wasn't really allowed to think for myself. I was in abuse. And so it's like it's so exciting. And even I'm not going to really bring up politics, but the whole point of it, what I'm about to say is that I made a political post because I've never been allowed to say anything about politics because
Wow.
I just wasn't allowed to. So I said something. I had friends messaging me going, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Yeah, because you don't know me.
Yeah. You don't know if you knew me.
I'm just trying it out. See what I may not post about it ever again.
Yeah.
Let's just try it and see what happens. I'm not scared to try something new because if I try hypnosis and I don't like it, I won't do it again. And let's just try it. It's not going to hurt you
No, I agree.
unless something hurts you.
Tell me about your podcast. That's where I'm at. So I have to
Sure.
say, I love the name of your podcast
Oh,
and I
thank
love the
you.
name of your book. I mean, both those titles really are very much resonating with me. So tell us a little bit about your podcast, how
Sure.
you started it, what it's really
Yeah.
about.
Well, so my husband and we got divorced for irreconcilable differences. But then I didn't realize he was a narcissist until about 4 months later when I found out about his quote unquote new girlfriend. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so things started downloading and like it felt like the blindfold got ripped off. And I was like, oh my gosh. I started to, oh my gosh, he's a narcissist. And I started like research and I was like, holy crap. And so I started to understand. And so what I did, like any sane person would do, I started to be super petty on social media. That's life. So let me tell you why. The reason was because for 33 years and really for 55 years of my life, I had my voice silenced.
Mhm.
And he narrated, took care of all that, right? He was the one who, I don't know why I can't think of what I want to say about that, but he was the one who had control of that. And I wanted to, there it is. I wanted to control the narrative. That's
Mhm.
what I wanted to do. And so in my haste, I was like, let's be petty. So I did. And so I posted something. I've never used his name. Doesn't matter. Insert your narcissist here.
I love it.
It doesn't matter. I never use his name. And so I was doing that, and people were like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I don't know why I want to do this. It's because nobody is talking about this. Why isn't anybody talking about this?" And so I had people messaging me saying, "Hey, Laura, did you know that my first marriage was abusive, and now I'm happily married for 25 years?" And I said, "No, because we don't talk about it." So I had this deep need to talk about it and find women like me.
Mhm.
That's where it came from, a deep need to find a community like me who felt alone and ashamed. And I'm
Mhm.
like, I don't want anyone to go through this. And then I'm a woman of faith. And so in some of the circles I was running, a lot of people were just like, you just forgive him and you move on and things are fine. And I said, okay, that doesn't even feel right to me. Even as a Christian, it didn't feel good to me. I said, but he's just over there abusing. Are we not concerned with
Yeah,
what
come on.
he's doing?
Yeah.
And so I was doing some coaching with a friend and some wellness coaching, and she was helping me like dream. I didn't even know what that meant. I said, I want to start dreaming. And I would update her because we were friends, and I'd say, that's just where I'm at. And then one day I stopped and I said, wait, is that something? And I don't know what it is. And this is why I want to encourage your listeners, write it down. Even if it like just comes to your spirit, comes to your mind, just write it down. I knew nothing. I just wrote it down, put a big circle around it. I didn't know what it meant. But as I started to heal and started to do some coaching, I started to dream about, I think I want to do a podcast and talk about this kind of stuff. Talk about things that we are quote unquote not supposed to be talking about in society. So I talk about lots of things, and that's how my podcast came to be. And I still do petty videos, but but now they have a purpose.
I love it. I have to
I
say,
enjoy them.
I love it. I think it's great. At least you're like, okay, here I am. I'm petty because you know what? That's where you're at and you're human.
That's it. It's not about that we have to be through our healing to be able to share. That's why I wanted to name it That's Where I'm At, because the person in front of me can show me how to get there and I can help the person behind me. And that's what I want people to understand, because I also felt like many people weren't talking about things until they were all done with their healing, and I've been healed for years and all this stuff, and I'm like, I feel like I'm still unraveling things,
And
but we
the
can still
healing
help
is
each other.
right. It's never ending. I'm just when
No,
you think you've uncovered layers, then like there's 17 more layers that need to be stripped. I mean, I have to tell you,
let's not
every
scare
time.
anybody.
Yeah, yeah, I know that's true. Like I just thought I was like, oh, I'm all done healing. Then all kind of things
Yeah,
came up, and I was like, okay, but whatever. None of us are ever healed. It's all
no,
good. But
no,
yes,
it's good.
I
Yeah,
100% agree with you. We should all be talking about all of these things
yeah,
more because what it does is it creates a sense of unity
yeah,
and it starts to dispel that isolation that many of us feel
that's
while we're
it.
going through difficult things in our life.
Hmm.
And so I'm so glad, and I do love the name because
Thank
honestly
you.
one minute you could be petty and that's where you're at, and then
Right,
you could be healed from the petty and
right,
that's you're
exactly.
somewhere else. So it's
It's
great.
so, I mean, it's true. And it just really be where you're at and then help the next person. And a lot of, not a lot, but some people, and this happens all the time, especially with trolls, they say like, well, you're petty, you are talking about the past and things like that. And it's like, just because we're bringing awareness and talking about our story doesn't mean we're bringing up the past. We have to bring up the past to tell our story. So don't let anyone stop you with that. You don't have to stop that.
I think that that's really great advice because it, part of, think about it when back in the old days,
Yeah.
we used to sit around at night because we didn't have TVs and we didn't have cell phones, and they used to share stories. So wisdom used to get passed down from
Yes.
generation to generation
Yeah.
verbally through stories
Right.
that we would tell. Then the modern age starts coming about, and I feel like a lot of that got lost.
Hmm.
And also, I think people lived in communities that were more close
Yes.
knit. So we got to share and understand all that knowledge from other people. So I
Yeah.
feel that I would like to see that sense of
Hmm.
community come back more and more in our society where we're not looking at people, pointing
Hmm.
fingers, ostracizing them, but just looking at them and saying, wow, well, they're going through a struggle that, maybe I've gone through, maybe I could go
Hmm.
through, maybe I know someone who
Yeah.
has gone through, and feel that unity to bring us all together.
Hmm.
I mean, that is so much what I want for the show to
Yes.
raise that awareness in that way. And it takes a
Hmm.
lot of courage for everyone that I've had
Good.
on the show, like you, to come to be open with their story and to
Mhm.
share their difficulties and their heartaches and all the things that they've gone through. It's not easy.
It's not.
Nobody wants to do this, to be honest with you. I don't know that they want to. They just, in my opinion, everybody I've interviewed, I feel they are compelled. I feel
Hmm.
that's the best word, right? I don't think
Yeah.
if you had a choice, you probably would just go rather live your life peaceful and go do
Yeah.
something.
I just can't help talking about this. I really can't, because it is bringing that awareness. And
Mhm.
someone said something really profound on my show was, shame is broken in community and in conversation. And that's why we're having these conversations, because that's the first place I went was shame. And that's where a lot of people go is
Mhm.
shame. And shame will isolate you and make you be quiet. And that's not what we need to do. That doesn't mean it's right. That just means that's where shame wants to take you, because that's a protection. But we don't need to necessarily go there. There's other women. I'm thinking about that woman that was like me,
Mhm.
who needed someone to tell her, you're going to be okay. I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that at the beginning, because I thought I was going to die. Like, really, I mean, 33 years. And then he was off with somebody right away. Like,
Oh,
you feel
that's
like,
painful.
yeah, you feel like you're gonna die.
Yeah, no, agreed. Well, I have to tell you, I am so blessed that, I was introduced to you and to have you on the show and to be talking about this because this is very, very important. I want women to hear it. I want men to hear it. I want everybody to hear these messages because it's important for all of us to maintain boundaries, our own self-respect, our own dignity, and our own self-love so that we navigate this world in a better way than what we've done in the past.
Yes.
So I have your podcast down here, and then obviously your new book's coming out, Married to a Nice Guy. Is it already out or is it
It
coming?
is. And it's a
Oh,
bestseller. Yeah.
yay! So, congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
So, all you people who want to support, all the audience members who want to support Laura Richards in this, please go buy her book, Married to a Nice Guy. And again, I'm so grateful to have you. Thank you for being so candid and sharing your experience.
Well, thank you for having me and allowing me to share my story and to be so candid. It's the only way we're going to, I just want people to know that I'm just like you. So if I can do it, you can too.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you. Have a blessed evening. And again, appreciate all your insight.
Thank you.
Well, I hope that was informative because there are a lot of people who go through so many things in silence. They suffer in silence. And I think that people like Laura, who are so courageous and talk about these things openly, really do a wonderful service to the rest of us who may be quiet, not realizing what's happening. It brings that awareness for us to change our lives. So next week, I have an interview with Josh Mackauer. Josh is a man that I've known for probably about 15 years. He's a medical doctor, he's an engineer, but the biggest thing that's different about him than other physicians and engineers is he's an innovator. So we're really going to deep dive into that story. He just took a completely different turn with his education than most people do. So keep an eye out for our episode next week. And I have to tell you, in the meanwhile, I'm trying to figure out how this fan really started on its own. This is really the mystery that's plaguing me tonight. And the last thing I will say is that I have had a co-host on my show for the longest time since they started it. Nobody knows he exists, but I felt like today, even though he's asleep, was time to really introduce him. All right, here he is. This is Enzo. Every week, he knows it's time for the show. He's sleeping. He knows what's happening. He curls up in a little ball under my feet and he gets really, really excited. So I thought it was time to bring him on camera and have him say hi. Today, I just felt like I needed to do that. But anyway, everyone have a fabulous Sunday. Tune in next week for another episode of Gloves Off, and can't wait to see you there.